Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. This is the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. Tonight is a show that I'm very excited about because we're welcoming back to the show one of the first co-hosts of the show, Benjamin Eaves. Benji, welcome back, buddy.
Hello, Kevin. Good to be back, man.
Yeah, you've had quite the adventure since you were last on the payroll here. Well, not that there's any payroll, but you know what I mean.
Just
So
the under the table stuff.
yeah, whatever. Yeah, tips for new music to listen to and whiskey samples. That's about it. So
Right.
but
right.
that's not too bad. That's not too bad. It won't show up on your W-2 though. So we're going to get into some catching up with Ben, and we've got some stuff to taste, some whiskeys that he's been involved with in his new gig, and we'll let him tell us all about that as well. But before we get into all of that, I want to tell you about Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who produce content for the whiskey enthusiast. We have shows like Distillers Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. Alan and Christy talk with distillers from across the country and around the world about anything and everything distillation. Alan also has a show, One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, where if you've got some questions about distillation, fermentation, yeah, you name it, you ask Alan, he'll give you an answer. He'll post a video response to it so we all can learn from your curiosity. Speaking of curiosity, Alan also has a show called If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. In this show, Alan breaks away from whiskey and spirits and gets into the spiritual and the supernatural and the unusual and the you name it, they get into it. It's a really fun show. Lots of interesting guests, so be sure to check that out as well. My Whiskey Den every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central Time. My Whiskey Den is where craft whiskey is king. Join in with Pat and Mike and Mitch and see what they've got going on. They'll have some really cool guests. They do some fun tastings, and it's always a great time with the good people in the chat. Whiskey in My Wedding Ring with David Levine. David is the newest addition to the Bar Cart Co-op, and David's a smart guy. He knows his stuff. He's got like a big vocabulary and writes well and he just knows what's going on. He's a great resource, and he has a wonderful blog where he posts reviews on whiskeys, and he has a podcast where he will talk with distillers about what they're making. It's very, very cool. Be sure to check that out. Then we have our show, Bourbon Turntable. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. We would appreciate that. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, you can subscribe there as well. Well, all that stuff's out of the way. Benji, what have you been up to, man?
Oh, just manifesting happiness and abundance and living in peace, love, and blah, blah, blah. No.
Yeah.
I've been working my butt off for a good almost 3 years now, kind of making my little tiny mark here in this industry here in Kentucky.
So we met in person a little over 3 years ago.
Right.
There we all are at Whiskey Thief. Well, I mean, if people don't know, you were one of the original cast of characters on My Whiskey Den.
Right.
And so we've got Pat and Mike flanking that photo, and Christy Atkinson there in the middle next to you. I believe Christy was, 45 minutes late that day.
Typically anywhere at any time, 45 minutes late.
Yeah.
We love you, Christy.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we all got together. And it wasn't, how long after that was it that you moved to Kentucky to start your career as a distiller?
That I think was that in April?
Yeah.
I think of that year. So by the end of November, I was here in Kentucky, starting my career down the distilling path. Getting my start in the bottling room, actually. So just starting literally from the ground up, basically.
Yeah, very a very glamorous life.
Very glamorous life, makes a lot of money. Yeah, no, got our hands on, got to see some good product go through. And just learning a distillery basically that handles everything like we do. So contract distilling, contract bottling, learning it from the ground up. And I don't know that there's a better way to do it really in some ways. So our head distiller and master distiller, Jade and Cody in respect, all started the exact same way in the bottling room. Kind of funny, just, I don't know, interesting trivia, if you will. So Jade Peterson's the master distiller, has been there for 10 years. He and I shared some very interesting similarities. We both moved from out of state to get to Kentucky, going through a divorce in the process. Both remarried in the last year, both remarried hygienists, both started in the bottling room, and both became distillers, et cetera, et cetera. Both were formerly in operations management before that. So just kind of very funny.
What kind of cult do you have going over there? This sounds very cult-like. I don't know about this.
After the show, we'll talk.
Yeah, but we didn't mention that it is Kentucky Artisan Distillery where you were working.
Exactly. Yep.
So yeah, and that is just outside of Louisville. So, and I think you guys have been ramping up your focus on the tourism side of things.
We have, yes, we are very much reinventing our tour center, if you will. Going to be developing some and furthering some experiences and taking this to a whole other level. I think long overdue, but I think some good things are happening there.
Yeah. Okay, so you started out in the bottling room,
right?
And how did you move? What was the progression from working in the bottling room to getting on the distilling floor, and then getting into the art and process of distillation?
So when I started, I mean, it was with the intention of becoming a distiller, getting into the distillation side. Jade basically said, "Hey, we've got an opening in the bottling line. If you want to start there, good place to start, and get some experience. And when opportunity comes, we can maybe work you over into the distilling side." And the expectation was that could be anywhere from 6 months to a year down the road. I started in bottling. Within about the second month, started training to be the line boss. And then in 3 months' time, we had a distiller leave and go somewhere else. And that opened a position up, and I was able to move right in. And so went in, started learning the basics we start with the grain and the cook and milling. Once you get that down, then you move over to the still, learn the still, then you start learning the processing side of things, and eventually the whole gamut. And then within, a fairly short time, earned the position of lead distiller. And that's where I'm at now, lead distiller, lab sensory manager, maintenance man. You just throw it at me. I pretty much have done it. Well, that's kind of our MO is, you're a distiller, you are tackling every aspect of this job, whether it's maintenance, plumbing, electrical, cleaning, whatever, cook to still to barreling to dumping barrels. Your hands are in all of it. So
yeah. Now the image that a lot of people have of being a distiller is you walk around the rick house thieving barrels and then staring up at the glass like this. That's nowhere close to the reality in the kind of distillery that you're working in.
The reality is that's nowhere a reality at probably 99.999% of distilleries that are around. This image of the master distiller walking around, looking in barrel houses, going through, pouring over barrels day by day to select those very specific ones for this blend or that blend. It's the reality of the business is that is not how it is for the most part. Small craft distilleries, perhaps so, but anybody that's got any kind of volume of production, that's just not the way things are done.
Yeah.
Even though that's the image that is put out. It's kind of like, I compare it to like when you go to a tour, when you go visit one of these Kentucky distilleries, two things: you're going to hear about the limestone water of Kentucky, and you're going to hear about the way we grow corn. And that's how bourbon was born. And it's bourbon propaganda, because the actual historical fact is none of that is very true. So
Yeah.
it's same thing. It's this image of the master distiller sitting looking at barrels. And so that's what I've, in the involvement that I've had, whether it be or with Instagram or whatever, I've tried to kind of take you behind the curtain and dispel some of that mythology.
Yeah. So let's mention your Instagram there. So tell everybody about that and what you're doing with it.
Padawan Distiller, that's it. I mean, I started into this industry fresh. Just my experiences home distilling. I got to shadow with Alan Bishop for a week up at French Lick and spent a few days down at Iron Root with those guys. And then kind of just launched straight in. So as a Padawan, I feel like that's going to be my position always. You're always learning. I don't believe in the master distiller thing. There's too many facets, too many aspects of this industry, of this of the alchemy of it, whether you get into the science side of it or the artistic side of it, or you dabble into both. There's so much to learn and so much growth and so much history that there's no way to master it all.
Yeah.
So it's a position of always learning. And that's where I want to keep myself, is trying to be humble and always learning, always growing, always looking to be better and to learn more. So
yeah,
that's my Instagram handle. And that's basically where I just try to shine a light on what distilling is really like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And I think for people that fancy themselves as, I would really like to do that. I love whiskey.
Sure.
You need to know how that translates. And it's there's a manufacturing operation going on too.
That's a big part of it.
It just doesn't magically happen that, hey, look, we got this in the bottle.
Right.
There is a process that has to be followed. And you were gracious enough to let me come out and kind of walk around with you a few weeks ago. And you've got, SOPs for everything. And you're refining and watching and looking at dials and all day long.
That's it. And for us at Kentucky Artisan, we are technically a craft distillery, whatever that really means, but I consider us like industrial craft, because the volume that we put out and a lot of our processes follows some of the bigger guys in what we do, just because of what our contract needs are. So there's a lot of things I think we do that are really cool, that I really love. And there's a lot of things we get to play around with, and we are constantly looking at and evaluating our processes. Those SOPs are being rewritten constantly, and developed out, because as we look and experiment and come up with better ways to do things, we're constantly changing. We're not stuck that this is the one way you have to do it and that's the only way you can do it. We're always looking and evaluating. And so we push each other, and we're being pushed by Jade to continue to develop and grow and learn. And how can we make this better? How can we improve the cooling? How can we improve the fermentation process? How can we improve the flavor coming off the still, as well as just simple efficiencies and making things more efficient and better, and honestly more profitable for the distillery, because that's bottom line. That's the end of the day. If you're not making money, then you're out of business. So
yeah, that old Pappy Van Winkle quote about we always make great whiskey, hopefully I'm paraphrasing, hopefully at a profit, but if not at a loss, but always great whiskey. No,
you're right.
Not for long. Not for very long.
You're not going to be around here, and where this market's headed, especially, you're not going to be around for very long.
Because you're looking at you're looking at the artistic side, the flavor side, the what tastes good, but you're also looking at not necessarily what I like, but what's the public going to like,
right?
And how efficient am I being in making it? What are my yields like? And do I have leaking barrels and quality control? There's 1,000 different variables that play into it.
Maintaining yields. I mean, it's things I've been confronted about is, hey, according to our math, we mashed in this many bushels of grain, which should equal this volume of spirit. How come we are below that level in production? What's going on? Is there something wrong with the still? Is there something wrong in our recording, et cetera, et cetera? So trying to month by month working through those problems and trying to maintain that consistency and quality level.
Yeah.
And for me, I love, my passion is the artistic side of distilling. But I think I also enjoy the engineering and the science side of it too. And I kind of like to straddle that line. So taking what we can with the science and engineering part of it, and then wherever I can work in that craft side to really be creative. And that's kind of where I feel like the two streams of the industry come in. And for me, where I like to sit in that stream, if you will, is kind of right between those two.
Yeah. All right. So you've given me a couple of samples of things that you've been involved with making. So the first is Whiskey Row. So tell us about Whiskey Row.
So Whiskey Row, that ownership has changed for them a few times. That was something very much associated as our house brand at one point. Technically it is not, but we are still very much involved with the process of the Whiskey Row product. I think the current ownership, Avalon Spirits, are doing a phenomenal job with really recreating this brand and the avenue it's going. Something that we haven't had before. They've released a cask strength. The bottle or the sample that you have is the second release of this, and I think it's actually the best one so far. The first one was fantastic, but I got to work very closely with the blends, the barrel selection, the blends that we did on this one, and on both of these, and seeing where that went to. So that's been a fun part of the process for me, is being involved in that arena, that area, working with our different businesses that we contract with and helping them develop their blends and their profiles and what they do. So but this one to me I thought was very well done. So see what you think.
Now, I remember the first Whiskey Row that came out. I thought if I remember right, it was bottled in bond.
There was they got to a bottled in bond, and I think there might have been something before that was just like a standard release. They've had several different small batch releases, and they had the bottled in bond, which I thought was really nice. And then now we're on to this. And
this is the second time I've tried this one. Right after I got it, I tried it. Okay. Same label.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Yeah. And one thing that I found with this is tonight I poured it a little early to let it kind of sit in the glass, and it picks up a little more fruitiness and a little bit of sweetness on the finish that I didn't get when I'm just pouring and sipping.
Right. And that for me, one of the things I pull from this that I've always enjoyed about Whiskey Row, especially if it involves our 4-grain bourbon, but this one in particular, there's that dark fruit note is like almost reminds me of blueberry a little bit, and I'll get almost like a blueberry pastry kind of thing going on, a little bit of like a granola and blueberry note, almost like a breakfast bar type thing.
Yeah, it's those little granola filled blueberry things you can pick up at convenience store on your way to work when you're running late. Also get some almost a hay with it, little walnut, and then some oak on the finish. But again, after letting it sit out, there's a little bit of caramel sweetness that comes in there that, again, when I first tried it, I did not get that sweetness at all, and honestly didn't get that blueberry dark fruit that time either. It really comes to life sitting in the glass for just, I don't know, 20 minutes.
Right. And that's, again, one of the things that I love about it. One of my favorite things about a spirit, that when I consider something kind of next level, is when you have that development in the glass. As it oxidizes a little bit, it changes. Every sip is a little bit of something different. If I take a sip and it's the same 3 notes over and over again, I'm bored with it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
I like something that's got some complexity. And for me, this has some really good complexity to keep things interesting. For me, there's a little bit of a confectioner's sugar sweetness that comes in after that fruit note. I get the grassy note that you're talking about, kind of a dried hay.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of black tea and honey.
Yep.
And I get a little bit of dried tobacco on that as well.
Yes, I had tobacco written down as well. A little leather and a little bit of mint on the finish too.
On the palate too, there's more of a kind of that brown spice, that cinnamon kick on the mid palate.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you that's the way to drink this. Pour it, let it sit for a bit.
Right.
Man, it opens up. There's so much more going on than just, again, pour it and drink it.
Right.
But that, again, I think that's a sign of a well-made whiskey, is that it's going to develop as you drink it. Like you say, it's not the same 3 notes every sip.
Right. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, there's a place for that. There's a place for
Sure.
Your easy sipping, not want to think about it kind of thing. But then there's the place for when you want to sit down and contemplate what you're drinking. This one's going to grab your attention a little bit.
If I'm at a bar listening to music, I'm not focusing in on tasting notes.
Right.
Give me a Wild Turkey 101 and I'm happy camper.
And it's what's funny. So for me, getting into this industry and in this life, so to speak, it's completely flip-flop, because it used to be, when I was on the enthusiast side of things, that's what I wanted every night, was to have a pour of something, explore something new, sit down and taste and evaluate, spend 30 minutes to an hour sipping through it, writing down notes and stuff like that. So I do that all day at work. Like, I'm at work every day, and I'm often usually doing sensory samples on stuff that we got going to bottling, or even stuff that's going into barrels, or whether it's a project for a new contract or something like that we're developing. So I get that every day at work. So when I come home, it's like, I just want to relax. And so more times than not, I'm making myself an old fashioned or a Manhattan, or I'm drinking tequila, or I'm having a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Occasionally on the weekend, I'll sit down and we'll crack a interesting bottle of rye or something like that. And I'll sit down and sit through and evaluate.
Yeah.
But more times than not, because I'm doing that at work, at home, I tend to just give me that something easy to sip and enjoy and relax with. And
yeah. No, I get that. I get that completely. You had talked about being a craft distillery. How do you define that?
There's legal definitions, obviously, because from a taxation and classification standpoint, it depends on state to state. As far as basically, bottom line, it's usually how many gallons of spirit you produce in a year. So for me, though, I don't know how to pinpoint that exactly. It's a question that I know when we were on My Whiskey Den, we were wrestling with really big, because that was our focus, was on craft distilling, craft spirits. What do you define as craft? Is artisanal a better word? It's kind of one of those generic things that people throw around, like small batch or single barrel, or even cask strength, et cetera. There's not really a legal definition for it,
right,
in the sense that we want to think of. So I'm still, debate's still open. I went, and a couple of months ago, we went with the guys at Jim Beam, with a couple of their distillers and managers. And that discussion, we got into that discussion pretty in depth, because that's one of the things they're wanting to dispel, is this notion of them as being this big industrial distiller, and kind of like, hey, we're craft too. And I think they made some very valid points, and especially with the building of the Fred No distillery they got here, and some of the experimental things they've got going on. I think they do some fantastic stuff. I walked away very highly impressed with Beam and their process and what they're doing. So, are they craft distillery? Is the little micro distillery that's in a single little pot still in the back of a brewery in Texas, South Texas. Is that a craft distillery? Is Barrel House over here in Lexington, is that a craft distillery? Is what we're doing, are we a craft? So it's, how exactly do you define that? Is it about the breadth of product that you're able to make and do? Is it the volume? How do you actually define that? And that's
I think somewhere in there's got to be the liberty of creativity.
right.
And I think you're right. I think Beam's trying to do some things like that. I think if you look at the Little Book series that Freddie does,
Right.
I think there are craft elements to that. And I think that they're trying to bring a level of creativity to what they're doing that's not just a gimmick.
Right.
But the big guys, they can't maneuver and change and, hey, well, let's just try this out.
Right.
They can't do that. Let's shake up our mash bill today, or use a different yeast and change our fermentation time, and they can't do that. You clutter up the process, and somewhere down the line, it's gonna show up, and it's gonna show up on some spreadsheet with some dude in Chicago or New York or wherever, and they're gonna want to know what happened.
Right. So and that's what I think. I think I don't want to say they're unique, but I think they're interesting among the big heritage distillers in being in a position, especially with the Freddie No Distillery, and being able to do what they can do and experiment from week to week with different batches, different. They're running a ton of different mash bills constantly out there, experimenting with different things. And you can go to their shop and you can find some of these being released. One of the examples I think is interesting is the new A Overholt rye that they did, the 80/20 rye, that I think is fantastic.
Yeah, agreed.
Love to see them taking a different route with that. And anybody that's into craft spirits, I'd definitely encourage you to find a bottle of that and check that out. That's cool. But I agree with you, and I think it's the ability to be creative. And I think that's what people probably most associate with craft and artisanal more than anything else, is the ability to be creative.
Right.
And are you stuck on a heritage mash bill, these 3 or 4 mash bills that you're running and cranking out millions of gallons in volume every year? Again, nothing wrong with that. There's a thirsty public, and that, we can't all have craft, so to speak.
Right.
Probably wouldn't meet the demands, but is that the defining goal? Is the ability to shift, the ability to create, the ability to move beyond, and do some things different.
And I think people used to associate, and fairly enough, that craft meant young,
right?
And the mindset was, well, if it's young, then it's not good, which is completely a falsehood. But that's what's beat into the bourbon community is, you want that 15-year Knob Creek, not the 9-year Knob Creek. You want everything is, it's only 4 years old, it's only 2 years old. Well, it's garbage. I don't want that. But now we're in an era that we're getting some older whiskeys out of craft distillers that, like Iron Root, you mentioned earlier, they're celebrating their 10-year anniversary this year. So there's some aged product out there. I'm interested in that. I don't know that it'll necessarily be, well, this is better. But let's find out.
I'm not going to name names, but there's one in particular. I think you and I maybe have had a brief discussion about this, that I tried some of their older product, and quite honestly, I didn't think it was great. And I love their younger stuff more than what I tasted of the older stuff. So yeah, young can be a good thing. I wonder how much, and this is just me just randomly, I wonder how much the whole single malt Scotch industry has leached into the brain of American drinkers, and that we're thinking it's got to be minimum 10 years before it's good.
Right.
And then you start getting into scotch, and it's the older the better. Oh, this is a 20-year-old. Oh, this is a 30-year-old. Well, for me, quite honestly, even getting into scotch, by the time it's 20 years old, most of it's sherry cask finish, and basically I feel like I'm just drinking a glass of sherry and not even drinking scotch. So I would really challenge that. Now, does it mean that it's bad? By no means. It's usually phenomenal. I enjoy drinking it, but I also like to taste the whiskey. I like to taste the malt. And so for me, I move towards younger spirit. And even in this realm, we have had the opportunity to deal with some older spirit here at Kentucky Artisan, whether it's doing a project for somebody or something from our own stocks. And there's been a very small handful of things that are over 10 years. Recently got to try some 19-year-old Heaven Hill from the barrel. It was phenomenal. It was absolutely fantastic. Some 16-year-old a year ago that we did for somebody that my mind was blown at how good it was. But those are very few and far between. The majority of stuff that comes in with that kind of age on it is very tannic, very acidic, typically goes into blends in small amounts to add a little bit of character, but not to overwhelm. But on their own, it's not really something pleasant that you want to drink. So for me, anything from about 4 years and up, just depending on how it's distilled and how it's done. Like there's some product that we get in that's 4-year-old, it's in char 4 barrels. And to me, literally the only thing I can taste is char and oak.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's very good.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff like what I know Alan has produced when he was at French Lick, 4-year-old, 4-grain, and barrels that taste freaking phenomenal, as well as from distilleries and other places. Our stuff, our 4-grain bourbon that's 4 years old in barrels, to me tastes absolutely phenomenal. So it's, just depends on what it is, how it's made. It's the intention. Are you distilling? Are you setting up this fermentation and this distillation for something that's going to age that you want to get 6, 7, 8, 10 years out of, or are you producing it in a process in a way that you're ready to pull it from the barrel 3 to 4 years?
Yeah,
it's all in how it's made.
Yeah, it goes back to the old business adage: begin with the end in mind. And if you're thinking, okay, well, this is something that, if you're a fairly young craft distiller, you're thinking, okay, I want to be able to get product out as soon as I can. So I'm starting out my process, and what I select as grain, how I ferment it, how I distill it, how I cut it, with the idea that I want to be able to age this for 2, 3, 4 years, not 10 to 15.
Right.
Because I got bills to pay.
Right.
So, but how do you make it good? And you've got to set that up before you even start, in order to make it good when it gets in the bottle.
Right. So it's literally working it from the end backwards to the beginning, and that's how you got to do it. But you need to have a goal in mind, not just here. Let's get some grain. Let's create a mash bill. Let's cook some mash. Let's ferment it. Let's still it. Let's throw it in a barrel. And then we'll figure out what the hell we're going to do with it. Do that. Chances are you're not coming out with anything good. So
So let's taste this other one that you sent me, which is tell us about that. It's a rum cask finish.
We've been for Jefferson's. We've been bottling, prepping and bottling the old rum cask. So it's Jefferson's bourbon. We put that, typically how that process works, typically about January, February, we'll get the bourbon. We dump those barrels. We cut it down to a certain proof point. It goes into rum casks that are brought in. And I'll be honest, the rum casks that Jefferson's is able to source and bring in are phenomenal. There's a lot of Foursquare. There's can't recall off the top of my head, but there was a New Zealand distillery that produced rum back in the 70s that went defunct. I believe it's still owned by Seagram's. They release some of those barrels ever so often to the market, but we got some of those barrels in. And in the nearly 3 years that I've been here, we've gone through a couple of batches of rum cask. And for me, this is one of the best ones yet. And this is ones I got to put into the barrel, and then we harvest, do the proofing, do the filtering, goes through a chill filter process. A lot of the Jefferson's product does. And which is, from a distiller standpoint, it's an absolute pain in the ass. But you got to do what the customers want, and sometimes that there's a lot of pushback against chill filtering, especially from enthusiasts in the craft side. But there is a place for it, depending on the product. There is a proper place for it. However, I feel like this is some of the best stuff. So I was able to snag you a sample straight from the barrel. So this is uncut, unfiltered. Thought that would be a great way for you to evaluate it and kind of see what they do. But
here's what I love about this.
Yeah.
The rum finish doesn't overwhelm it.
Yes, sir.
And that means that you, Jade, and whoever took the care and the time to evaluate this as it aged in that rum cask. It wasn't just throw it in there, put it in the corner. We'll get back to it when we get back to it.
Right.
Because too often, I think, well, really anything that's aged in a rum cask can be overpowered pretty well. I think the rum finish with a bourbon or a rye, I think it fits really well. But I think there's also a point where, wow, the rum finish is just overwhelmed whatever the base spirit was, and you can't even tell what it was to begin with. So was it any good to begin with? Or are you just trying to mask it by over-aging it in something else?
I mean, I can go ahead and tell you, at least from my experience at Kentucky Artisan, I can't speak for everybody, and I think that is generally something that is thought of when it comes to cask finishing, is especially in the craft. Oh, you got some bad spirit, you're just trying to fix it. Let's throw it into a sherry cask or a rum cask or something like that. Reality is, when it comes to a product like this, that is never what the intention is. That is never what comes through. The bourbon that goes in is top quality bourbon. There's nothing bad about it. It's the end goal is what we're doing here, creating a finished product that's going to have some nuance and reflect some of the character of that finishing barrel without being overwhelmed or overpowered by that barrel. And I think that's where as you said, there's a fine line in watching those barrels mature and pulling those samples and understanding your warehouse and warehouse placement, as well as the time of year that things start to where you expect them to finish at, the seasons that we go through here in Kentucky, and knowing where that's going to come out. So, we can either pull it and start the process before June, or we need to wait till about September or so, and then we'll, let it go through a summer season. We'll hit it again. But that's what out of the Jefferson's product, the old rum cask is one of my favorites that they do that I like. And I feel like this has been one of the better batches that I've ever had. So
yeah, I like that a lot. It's very, very good. And I know that when I was out there a few weeks ago, you and Jade and I had a pretty good conversation about the attention that you guys give to the sensory training.
Right.
And as an adjacent question to that, when you're aging something in a rum cask, do you keep some of that base spirit as well?
Yes, we have retention samples. So that typically that stuff, we're dumping those barrels, or it's from a facility where it's already dumped and being brought over in a tanker. We're going to pull samples. We're going to evaluate that before we do anything with it, period. And then we retain those samples as well. I mean, that's just industry standard, basically.
Yeah.
But
because to me, that would be the fascinating next step with this is, okay, I've got let me try the base spirit with that went into this rum cask, and now let me try it out of the rum cask, just for
right.
For the fun of it, for science.
Done that, and probably one of the coolest things that I got to do since I've been here was a day on the floor where we were cooking and fermenting a specific recipe, running that recipe off the still. So every morning when I come in, I'm doing what we call T's and G's. So temperature, gravity, pH.
Mhm.
We're checking all the fermenters. And for us, we are about, there's very little automation to our process at all. Everything is pretty much hands on. So even checking that, we don't have sensors hooked up to the fermenters to give us a readout and tell us what those are. It's a we go and pull a sample from every fermenter. We're physically checking with
Mhm.
hydrometers and pH meters, et cetera. So it's a hands-on process. So every morning I'm up there, and with every fermenter, I'm going through the physical assessment. Well, I'm smelling it, I'm tasting it, I'm visibly looking at it. Does this look active? Does it look normal? To me, for me as a distiller, the fermenters are my babies, man. That's what I care about. That's what I am paying close attention to and monitoring and watching. So I got to taste that fermenter. I got to taste that flavor.
Mhm.
When I'm running the still, about every 30 minutes to an hour, we're pulling a sample, we're checking the proof, we're checking the flavor. So I got to taste the fermentation. I got to taste the flavor off the still. Then I went to the single barrel house and helped some friends that were doing a single barrel pick. And I tasted that exact same mash bill 6 years down the road in the barrel. And you
Yeah.
could taste the flavor components from the fermentation to the still to 6 years later in the barrel. There was that flow of those flavors all the
Yeah.
way through to the end product. And that for me was very cool to experience.
Yeah. See that's something that I think is fascinating, and I in your Instagram page, as much
Right.
as you legally can, not violating, NDAs and other agreements, share that kind of stuff, because I think that stuff is fascinating. Just to see how things change as it goes through the process, and
Right.
so I'm a little jealous that you get to do that. Not jealous enough to, quit my job and go work the bottling line for 3 months. And no, I'm not. I'm not doing
Come on, man. We'll go unload a 288 barrel truck on a hot summer afternoon like I did this past week.
that.
Physical hands on, pull those things
uh,
down, roll them out, stack them up, and then let's go shovel rye out of the silo.
yeah,
Welcome to shit distillers do, man.
yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Um, Okay, we've got some more stuff we're going to talk with Benji about. We're going to get into some music stuff as well. Before we do that, though, I want to tell everybody about Colors of Courage. This is an organization that Morgan Wade introduced me to about a year ago, and she was on the show, and we talked with her. And Morgan is Mitch Weddle's girlfriend. Um, they've been together for, I guess, a couple of years now, and Mitch is on my whiskey den. But Colors of Courage is an event that supports and funds an organization called Hope Scarves. Hope Scarves, they fund uh, research for cures to cancer, and they also fill a very compassionate role of doing things that provide encouragement to cancer survivors, cancer warriors, and part of that is they have scarves that they'll send to women that are going through chemo, and so that if they lose their hair, they can wear the scarf like that. It's an organization that I really respect. I lost my mother to breast cancer a few years ago. I didn't know about Hope Scarves at the time. I wish I had, but she did things that were very similar to that. She would knit caps and take them to the hospital when she would go, and they would hand those out to um, other women that were going through chemo and dealing with that. So, what does that have to do with this? Here's what it has to do with this. They at their event, they do a bottle pull, and people will buy a ticket, and then when they buy that ticket, they'll be given a number, and that number will match a number on a bottle, and you get that bottle, whatever it is. And the more bottles they get, the more tickets they sell, the more money they raise. And, you know, let's be honest, most of us that are enthusiasts in this whiskey thing, we've got bottles sitting around that are good bottles that are more than what we need, certainly more than what we deserve. Let's put it to good use. You can donate those bottles. You can contact Anna Laura, ANNALAURA at hopescarves.org, and coordinate getting bottles to them that way, or just shoot me a message either in a comment to a show or on one of our social media accounts, or text me if you got my number. Let's help these folks out, because it's a great organization, great cause, great event. Colors of Courage, Hope Scarves. Please check that out and help that out. Thank you for your time and attention. All right. I gave you a couple of samples of things that I thought were kind of new and interesting. Tell you what, let's start with this one from the World Whisky Society, the Japanese single malt finished in bourbon and port cask. And Chip Tate used to own Balcones. He's now got Chip Tate Distillery that he's getting off the ground. He's building stills. He was the one that did the barrel selection and blend on this, so we'll give this a try.
And port character is just right off the top on the nose.
Yep. Yeah, there's no mistaking that.
No, very grapey. Grape skins, macerated grapes, sweet, sugary. It's very clean on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
There, you get that maltiness trying to come through underneath, but man, the port just really dominates that off the top. A little bit of chocolate, a little bit of grain coming through in there.
Do you get as much of the port on the palate and the finish as you do on the nose?
Close to it. I do get some of the malt, and there's some nice floral notes that want to try to burst through in there. But man, the finish that's coming up now, it is just rich dessert port character.
Mm-hmm. I don't get it as strong on the palate and the finish as I do on the nose, but it's definitely a lot of that port ruby cask influence. So what are your thoughts? Too much port?
Honestly, yes.
Yeah.
For me, like what I'm getting on the palate is very similar to the nose. It is raisin. It is chocolate. I get a little bit of that malts trying to punch through.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some interesting floral notes that are coming through in there that makes me curious about exactly what barrel types, what malt came from where, that go into this, because it makes my mind want to go. I get a little hint of Mizunara in there, maybe potentially, but not sure if that's the case. but the port is just so strong and dominating in this, which quite honestly, pour me a glass. I love port, so I have no problem sipping or drinking this, but I would love to see a little bit more of the malt character come on this for me.
Let's do this. Leave a little in your glass, and we'll
Yep.
come back to it a little later.
Okay.
See how that does. And then we've got one other that we'll try in a minute. But before we do that, I want you, and we kind of hint on this through messages and stuff from time to time, but and we've kind of touched on it a little bit tonight. But what do you see the state of the whiskey world, the bourbon world, distilling? Where do you see that right now? And I'm interested in your opinion, especially. Well, I'm always interested in your opinion, because one of the things that I think makes you good at what you do is you're a naturally curious person, and I think that and your work ethic is what's driving your success where you are now, and will be the thing that will drive your success down the road. But you're not just sitting there accepting everything as it's handed to you. That's not your personality on any level. It would be my estimation.
Quite honestly, that's literally, if you talk to Jay, that's why I have the role in sensory that I do, because I'm not just going to give a blank check and say, yep, it's good. Yep, it's good. I will tell him if something is shit. And I will tell him if something is not right.
Right.
I'm not going to tell him what he wants to hear. I'm going to tell him what my honest review and honest take is on something. So that's
and so with that in mind, I think your personality and your nature, combined with you getting into this industry as you did when you did, from your background as being someone that's a real enthusiast about it. A lot's changed in the last few years, in a lot of ways. So very wide open question. You can answer it however you'd like. I'm not trying to box you into anything.
Not at all. I'm very happy.
So what do you see as the state of this industry right now?
I think so. This is from a guy as an enthusiast, just so people are aware. I got into this nearly 20 years ago. So before what we call the bourbon boom started to take off, I used to buy Elijah Craig 18-year-old for $39 off the shelf, Total Wine.
Right.
Eagle Rare 17 for $70, and it was stacked deep on the shelf. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew anything about anything at that point. It was, the wild, wild west of the whiskey world. My first bottle of Japanese whiskey was Yamazaki 12-year-old that I paid $60 for.
Yeah.
Or try to find that for under $200, if you can even find it.
Right.
So this is, I've watched this go to where it is now. And I think conversations we've had at work, conversations I've had with other friends and with my wife, basically my viewpoint is we're riding the crest of that wave, and it is starting to curl on down. I think we're headed towards that crash, if you will. It's a cycle. I think there's other factors that are coming into play. But for me, as an enthusiast, like when I walk into a liquor store now, say just a Total Wine, for example, I walk in there. Usually 99% of the time I'm going in there, I'm not buying spirit. I'm going in to buy wine. But what I'll do, I'll usually go walk through the bourbon and rye aisles and just see what is available, what's there, where are things headed, what's new. And what I see is an overwhelming number of NDPs, basically. And it's, you've got a small handful of distillers that are producing for all these labels. And it is, if I were somebody new into whiskey, like I remember how I was 20 years ago getting into this and walking in, and like I was avoiding Blanton's because it looked like a gimmick in a bottle. I didn't know anything about it, didn't know what it was. Now that's obviously a lot of your bourbon bros are crazy about Blanton's. I give 3 rips about it.
Right.
But at any point, I didn't know what it was because it looked like a gimmick, and I was being very particular about what I was spending my money on, and trying to sample and trying to explore until I could educate myself more. But from that viewpoint, to walk into a store now as a newbie, I mean, obviously you've got YouTube communities, you've got all this information out there that can guide and direct you that I did not have back then. But the sheer volume of what's out there is absolutely overwhelming, especially in the bourbon world. And I think the market is just absolutely oversaturated. I think we're seeing a number of factors. You're seeing some of the big guys are slowing down production, which, just several years ago, man, everybody is like grinding gears. They couldn't shift them fast enough to ramp up production, to build more warehouses, to add more stills, to do whatever to meet the volume of demand that was there. And now we're starting to see that slow down. I'm looking at the barrel market and where the prices of barrels are at and what's available on the market. And that's telling me that we have an absolute glut on the market of available barrels in production.
And when you say barrels, you're talking about not buying new barrels from like ISC or anything like that. You're talking
these
about
are aged barrels,
aged barrels with
that
liquid in them.
distilleries are releasing onto the market for sale.
Right.
So people who have a rectifier's license, et cetera, NDPs, whoever, these are what's available for them to go pick up.
Right.
And there's an absolute glut, and prices are going down. So there's a lot of things indicator wise. And then when you look at societal trends, I'm Gen X. I think we're a big part of what drove this whole whiskey boom. I think millennials were a big part of that as well, especially exploring craft cocktails and whatnot, wanting to explore and step out. Well, the generations coming after that are now hitting 21, they're not the drinkers that we were, and a lot of them don't drink at all.
Right.
And populations are declining. I mean, let's face it, whether you're China or America or Japan or whoever, we're not having babies like we were before. And so there's things that are moving toward there just has to be a decline at some point. This wave is not going to ride forever. It's been a big boom. It's been a hell of a boom. People have made a lot of money off of this for the last 20 years. But I think we've hit that crest and it's starting to ride down. I think there's still money to be made. I think there's still opportunities out there, but I think it's going to get extremely competitive. And I think distilleries are going to have to really start to tighten the belt, get lean, and be able to shift and move towards wherever these markets are going to go.
Yeah.
So that's where I see things headed.
Yeah. I think there were a lot of people pushing all their chips in the table, betting that having more volume, more product would get soaked up by an international market.
Right.
Because I mean, I'm sure you've seen all the graphs and statistics that show, look what a small share of the spirits market bourbon has, and thinking that, well, we'll tap into Europe and Asia and all over the world and South America, and everybody's going to want our product. And I don't think that it's worked out that way.
I mean, there have been a handful that have done well. Jefferson's is one. Jefferson's is a brand that has done exceptional on the international sales, and that's what's fueled a lot of their growth. But that's not everybody,
Right.
And I think there has been some interest in Europe, but it never panned out to be what we thought it would be. And then you have, now 6 years ago, Trump comes into office, and you've got a lot of the tariffs and a lot of the political wars, if you will, that went on that I think hindered a lot of that potential for growth. And now things have just moved and shifted. And that's what I think. There's a lot of political headwind that, quite honestly, imports, exports are going to have to battle. And looking at the world stage and where things are at right now, it's not looking good. I think, maybe 10 years ago, hell, Russia might have been an interesting potential for growth, even in bourbon and whiskey. But that market's completely shut off now. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
there's lots of things that are always evolving, and that's normal for world politics, normal for, you know, just that stage. And so you can't just bank on that kind of growth that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Be poised to take advantage of it if you can, but you can't
Right.
bankroll it, man.
There was almost, if we build it, they will come mentality to it. At least
Yeah,
that's what it seemed to be.
right.
Um, and I think that again, it may have panned out for some, and there still may be opportunity that it will at some point. But right now, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that we're looking at rising prices on products on the shelf that uh, people at some point are just going to say, no, I'm not. I'm not doing that. If 5 years ago you could get Henry McKenna for $30, and now and you went several years without being able to find it. Now it's, if you're walking through Total Wine, seeing what's
right.
on those shelves, you'll see Henry McKenna sitting there sometimes at $70, and it's sitting there. People are
Exactly.
saying, no more. I'm not doing that.
Right. And that to me, it's the wild thing, like the craze for Weller because of the whole Pappy thing. That was, for the most part, a bottom shelf bourbon 20 years ago.
Right.
I wouldn't even thought about. It was a good bourbon, and it was a stellar for the price point, but still, that was bottom shelf stuff. That wasn't even premium label stuff.
Yeah.
And now it's like allocated and highly sought after, and people think it's an absolute prize if they get one. And I'm just over here like, you can have it. You can have it all day long. I'll sit here and drink stuff like this and
Yep.
be very happy with the complexity and the value. I'm an enthusiast, but I am not a hunter. I'm not going to pay those prices for that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think where we are headed is eventually it's a good thing. There's going to be a glut. It's going to be just like back in the 60s or so. In 70s, there's going to be an absolute glut of aged product on the market. And I'm already seeing it to a degree in certain places, in
Yeah.
certain ways. And for the consumer, those of us who are still going to be enthused about bourbon, I think there's no need to worry. Things are going to a good place because you're going to have such a glut of product. Certain things are going to go away, but there's going to be plenty of good stuff out there. And hopefully we'll see prices start to reflect that and start to come back down. The biggest thing is, bottom line, the idiots out there have got to just stop buying it for stop paying what you're paying for it.
Right.
Bottom line, the second
Right.
you stop, they're going to stop demanding those prices. But as long as you're willing to shell out bucks for freaking corn in a glass, I'm sorry. I love this. I'm absolutely passionate. I am passionate about distilling. I love this career. I love what I do. But at the same time, I think it's just gotten absolutely stupid, beyond
Yeah.
stupid, what
Right.
some of these people are doing and what they're paying for this stuff. It's,
Yeah.
as Alan likes to say, we're not curing cancer out here, guys.
Right.
What
Right.
the hell are we doing?
Right. No, I think we went through an era where the the whole, I don't know if it's fear of missing out. I don't know if it was people following for propaganda,
Right.
whatever the case may be. Uh, there were some of these big boy distillers were just picking the pockets of the people that were their customers.
And they still are. You see stuff that's being pushed out there is ultra premium, and it's literally 4-year-old stuff that's not that great,
Yeah.
to be honest. And it's demanding high prices, and people are paying it and thinking, "Oh, this is wonderful," just because it's got a certain label on it.
Yeah.
Man, you're just getting ripped. Sorry, you are. And I think as consumers, you got to be smarter. And I don't know if it's the whole, like, there's a generation of people that missed out on the conspicuous consumption of the 80s, so that's what we're turning bourbon into.
Yeah.
Just because that's what it looks like, is conspicuous consumption. Let me show this on Instagram, show off this bottle I was able to pick up that
Well,
couldn't get, etc. And just like, I'm
yeah,
sorry, I don't care.
you,
Go,
you,
go do your tape measuring somewhere else. It's
you know what those Instagram photos are like. It's somebody with uh, a bottle of, something probably from Sazerac, okay?
Right.
And they're sitting in their car and they're holding the bottle and they've got their $2,000 watch on their wrist, and you can see the logo of their Mercedes or their
Right.
BMW or whatever in the background of the photo. And I'm sorry, no, who's impressed by that?
Yeah.
Use your Instagram for good and not evil. And if it's just to stroke your own pride, that's evil. Let's promote some things that are good and different and fun and would appreciate the fact that you've promoted it.
Right. Here's what I look at, and here's what I like to get into about this is like everybody wants to talk about the master distillers and everybody wants to talk about the big fancy names out there, whether, who you pick your choice, pick your distillery, whoever we're talking about. For me, from my perspective, what I'm looking at is most of those people you're talking about, if they've ever touched a still, they haven't touched one in years.
Right.
Let's be honest. Just haven't. Most of this product that you're enjoying, and I can testify to this, it is literal blood, sweat, and tears on the floor every day making this stuff. It's guys, I hate to say it, it's guys like me that are busting their ass 10, 12 hours a day. And I mean, literal blood, sweat, and tears that go into the day-to-day production of what this is being made. None of those people, you will ever know their names. You'll never know their names. Some of them don't even stick around that long in the industry, but they have paid their dues. They have put their work in. People can call them lever pushers or whatever. It just depends on which distillery they're at. But they're the ones laboring, working, making it happen every single day.
Right.
And that's the guys that I will drink to. And that's the kind of bourbon that I want to enjoy, is because to me, this is a blue collar drink. It's made by blue collar people every day. And this industry has made billions on the back of these blue collar people. And that's who, cheers to you guys. People, a century's worth of labor. People never know your name, but here's to you, because I see the work that you've done every day.
Well, let's turn our eyes and ears towards music a little bit. I know that you are a big fan of the band Tool, so I wanted to talk with you a little bit. Here are the guys, rowdy looking bunch there, but clearly getting a little older, which
it's interesting to see what hairpiece Maynard's going to choose for whenever he's on.
Yeah.
That has become one of the more fun things. They're going on tour. All right, what wig, what hairpiece is he going to throw?
Yes. So what drew you to this band?
So probably to best understand that question is to understand my love of music, what that is first. I'll dig into that for just a second. For me, I am first and foremost a lyrics guy. Like coming out of high school, coming through college, I was a writer. I did a lot of writing, poetry, symbolism, metaphor. I am into all that. I am a total left brain guy, which is probably why I very much like the artistic side of this craft of distilling. So I can talk in metaphysical stuff. I can dig into that all day long. You want to talk engineering and math and stuff like that, get out of my face. I can't hear it, man. My ADD is gone. Just, I struggled in math, which is funny to say because you're in distilling and you deal with math equations all day long. And yes, I do. And I hate that part of it. But but when it comes to music, I love the music. I love the instrumentation. I play guitar. I play a little bit of mandolin. I absolutely love the musical side, but what draws me in is the lyrics. Usually I'm very much a lyrics guy. And in that capacity, music for me is literally a vehicle for me to process my emotions. So what I listen to is more determined by how I feel.
Mhm.
So I'm not always a guy that's just, hey, what's the latest? What's the new thing?
Mhm.
Because if I'm not feeling it, I'm not listening to it. You can turn something on, it could be incredibly awesome. But if that's not emotionally where I'm at in the moment, I don't care. And so that's why it's always hard for me to like explore a lot of new bands. Something has to trigger me to go, yeah, catch something. It captures me. And so a lot of music for me is helping me process through moments in time and moments in my life, and that's typically what music is for me. I have a very, very deep connection not only to that aspect of it, but also it inspires creativity. So for me, Tool is, as much as it is about the amazing time signatures and just the instrumentation and the creativity and what they do, it's also the lyricism,
Mhm.
the lyrics that Maynard creates with his projects. And whether it's Tool or Pussifer or Perfect Circle, I very much have been enraptured with what Maynard, the creativity with what he puts into these projects. So what captured me with Tool very back, um, probably I would venture to say my first experience with Tool is up late night watching Beavis and Butthead and on MTV, and when they have their segments where they're playing the videos, that for me in my part of the country in South Carolina, because radio really sucked around that area, and we didn't quite yet have Napster, we didn't have avenues of really getting to hear like the grunge thing when it was exploding.
Right.
That hit us a year or two later. It was, you're up late watching MTV and you're catching like on Beavis and Butthead or something, these videos that are coming up of bands you had never seen, never knew who they were until you get a little glimpse of that. So seeing some of their very first videos from their first album, Undertow,
Yeah.
that was probably my introduction, and I was immediately hooked. I think Prison Sex was the first song that really, really kind of snagged me. Just hearing that opening, that almost like a screen door, that screech on the guitar
Mhm.
string, like a screen door opening up, that creepy eeriness, and that kind of caught my attention. Got the album, and then when finally they released Enema, that's when I was gone, man. I was gone. Just the subject matter that they dealt with in the songs, the getting more into a psychedelic type sound with a lot of things like Third Eye, and just some of the subject matter that they explore. I love one of the things I'll talk about with Maynard, like with his lyricism. I call it the moralizing of Maynard.
Yeah.
Maynard's an interesting character in that he's often very tongue in cheek. There's a lot of joke. There's a lot
Mhm.
of, he makes fun of a lot of things with his music, but in doing so, it's always very interesting. There's a lot of times some deep moralizing and criticizing that he's doing of society that if you pay attention and pick up on it, you realize, holy shit, this guy's deep. And some
Yeah.
of his perceptions about where we are as a people. And part of that is just understanding who Maynard is. He's really, yes, he fronts what a lot of people call a metal band, but really he's just a punk slash hippie that grows some really good grapes, makes wine, and
Yeah.
has a slightly nihilistic view of society and the world. But through that lens, he has some pretty good perceptions of society. Yeah, just from the album Enema, a lot of people, made a big deal about the song Stink Fist,
Mhm.
and just
Well,
using all these
MTV made a big deal about that
yes,
song.
they did.
They
And
changed the name of it to track number 1.
right, right. I mean, and it's still funny today. You get people who aren't that into Tool, and you bring up the song Stink, and you're like, wait, what? And you hear the lyrics, and you're thinking, I mean, just graphically, it sounds like you're dealing with anal fisting. And on the surface, you are, but the reality is when you look at those lyrics, he's using that topic kind of as a shock to draw attention to what we're dealing with in society. The song is not really about that. It
Right.
is about our, as a culture, the fact that we are always craving more. We need more. We need more. We're never satisfied. And so we need things to shock us, to take us to the next level, to feed our appetites. And again, song after song after song that Tool does often deals with those perspectives.
Yeah.
The other thing I really like about the band is watching them evolve and develop from from Opiate to Undertow to Enema on down the line to their latest. Just seeing them mature and develop as a band. Maynard refers to the first couple albums as like their primal scream. They're dealing with a lot of childhood trauma, etc. It's kind of getting that out, but you can't always stay there, you know.
Right.
And so you see them evolve and mature, and the subject matter matures with them as well as their sound. And I think for me, that's one of the most amazing things to watch and to see that progression. I've had friends that talk, well, I really like their first album, man. Everything after that got weird. I'm like, you're missing it. That's what if all you want is that rage, you're missing it, which I think is another cool topic is you dig into the formation of Tool, and Maynard almost was the lead singer for Rage Against the Machine.
Right.
I mean, he and Tom Morello were good buddies, and they tried him out, and they ended up going with De La Rocha over Maynard. So then Maynard stuck with his other buddies and developed Tool.
Yeah.
I mean, how interesting would music have been if that had gone
right?
Right.
That completely sideways. And I think that there are other things about those two bands that I find to be good compatible comparisons, and one is the guitar sounds, because I think Adam Jones and Tom Morello both are able to get just phenomenal sounds out of their guitars. It's like I didn't know guitars made those sounds, but they're really pushing the envelope on what all they can do. And that's apart from Maynard almost being the lead singer for Rage. I think that guitar approach is similar between the two. Now, I don't think you're necessarily going to mistake one for the other, but I think what those two guitarists are able to do playing their instrument, and how that just takes the band musically into a huge direction.
Right. No, I completely agree. I mean, they're both very unique in their own sound and how they use and apply the guitar, but what they're able to do with it, they're absolute masters of their tool, of their instrument.
Yeah.
And incredible. And that's what another thing I guess I love about Tool is every single member contributes so richly to their sound and to the song and to the albums, etc. I mean, whether you're dealing with Danny Carey on drums, who my oldest son is a huge, massive fan of. He's a drummer. He's been learning Tool songs and really getting into the technique and everything. And again, big fan of Danny Carey. I am as well. And then you got Justin Chancellor on bass. And for me, one of the most identifiable fingerprints of any Tool song is that bass riff, man. You hear that bass, you instantly, boom, that's Tool. I don't have to hear anything else. That's Tool. And you know that's them. And so what he contributes to that, all of that as well. And then you throw in the sonic fingerprint of Maynard's voice and his vocals and bring all of that together. And it's just, it's a, I don't know. For me, it's a freaking eargasm. It's a soulgasm. It's feeding the mind. It's feeding the soul. I just get lost in their music for quite a bit. But,
is there a favorite album?
Not really, because again, every album has its own thing, its own theme, and for me, again, music is that vehicle for dealing with processing emotions, processing life, working through a lot of things. So there's certain albums that got me through certain periods of life that in that moment, okay, yeah, this would be my favorite album, but now it's not. It's something else. If you put me in the whole like desert island situation, you can only take one Tool album. What would it be? And I would really be torn. It would probably be Lateralis. It's hard, man, because depending on mood and emotion as to what I want to listen to. So,
and I love that album as well. I would, and mine would probably be an unpopular opinion among Tool fans. Mine would be Fear Inoculum. Simply because,
that might be my second pick, or that might be like my 1A.
yeah.
So maybe those are my top two, but then there's days at 10,000 Days I just could listen to that on end. There's days I go back to Undertow and just get back to that raw emotion that album is, and then there's days where Enema, dive into that one, and probably, which is interesting because those albums, as I progress through them, there will be certain songs that I really key on first, and then years later I come back and it's all different songs that are now like the first one I listened to. So like Enema, Third Eye and Jimmy are the two songs I'm really coming back to now that in the past I didn't dig into as hard. Fear Inoculum. I mean, I've always loved Numa, but Invincible was one for me like a few years ago. I could not stop listening to that song. It just, in the moment where I was in life, that song meant a lot to me. Calling Voices is probably a big one now that I've really gone back to, which is weird, kind of a softer song overall from that album. And then Tempest, I mean, that to me is Adam Jones. That's like his opus right there. I mean, that thing is just ridiculous from a guitar standpoint. But give the moment, it's any one of them could be my favorite.
Yeah,
so.
I think that Fear Inoculum. Well, I mean, if you look at the band, started in early 90s.
Yeah, like 91, I think might be. They were rehearsing and practicing. Okay. 92 might be when.
And so we were both. I'm a fair amount older than you, but we were both a lot younger then.
Right.
And the things that might have been going on in our lives when they first started would have been one thing. But you fast forward 33, 32 years, whatever the case may be, if you look at the themes that are explored on Fear Inoculum, they're things that, as older men,
right?
I'm not saying old, but older men.
Dude, I feel 70 some days. So.
Brother, you're not telling me anything I don't know. But that album is exploring things that we're looking at now, and quite honestly, so is Maynard. Okay, Invincible to me is a song that, when I first heard it, it spoke to me about, okay, what are you doing with your life?
Right.
How is this some just prideful quest to stay relevant, or are you looking to really make a difference in the life of not just yourself but those around you? And how do you keep pushing forward?
Right.
And those were all questions that I was dealing with at the time. And quite honestly, they're questions that at a certain age that you're dealing with every day to some level. But that song just, okay, that's it. That hits it perfectly. Yep. And so I can listen to that song anytime, any day.
And it's amazing. I mean, it's an amazingly put together song, period, just from a music standpoint, but lyrically what it's dealing with. And it was kind of, for me, the same way, hitting questions of your relevance, where you are in life, feeling just completely beat down by the day-to-day battles, and are you gonna you're gonna pull this shield up and go at it one more time? What
right?
And is it for good reason? What what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And that's what I think is amazing about so much of his music, is it's the universal, I don't know, it's the relevance of the universal human condition,
right,
that he tackles and deals with in so much of his music. And it's even at different points in your life, you can go to a song that helped you through a moment 20 years ago, and now it's those same lyrics, but they're applied differently.
Absolutely.
To a different experience you're having, but they still have the same weight and the same way of helping you process through something. So that's so. And Maynard, if he heard this, he'd probably just be sitting there going, bunch of morons.
Yes.
But the reality is, and I mean, and that's what I think. He's very deprecating. He's very tongue in cheek, and a lot of his songs are just that, a very humorous look at a lot of things. But at the same time, he tackles a lot of really tough subject matter and does it in an amazing way. So.
Yeah. You had just to kind of go a little tangent here. You'd mentioned that he does have a winery in Arizona.
Yes.
Have you tried his wine?
I have, and they're phenomenal.
Yeah. I've got 2 bottles. I've had one once. Actually drank it with Alan and Kim. And I've got another that, quite honestly, I was saving for a time when we could get together, maybe to get together with the wives and have a bottle. So, but yeah, he's done incredibly well with it. I remember Fred Minnick did a live interview with him out at Maynard's house, I think, and and Fred's tasting the wine and he's getting all into the tasting notes, and I get this and I get that, and Maynard just keeps saying, "But do you like it? Oh, well, I taste this, and these notes come through. Okay, but do you like it?" That's what he wanted to know. And I think that you're saying we're going on and on about the depth of the lyrics and everything's in the songs, and I think at some point, okay, yeah, but do you like it?
Yes,
I think that may be the question.
Right, and it's kind of like part of he's got a song called "The Patient" where he kind of tackles that with the fans or using his music for therapy and whatnot, and he's just like, it's not what we're here for, man. You need to go find your own, figure your own life out. This music is me figuring my life out. You need to go figure your own life out for yourself.
Again, going back to the Alan Bishop quote, "We're not curing cancer here." That applies with the music stuff too. But
exactly.
Yeah. Hey, let's try this Wayward Cask Calvados, 25-year Calvados. We had I got this from sealbox.com. It is made by our friend Turner Wathen, who you may know from Rolling Fork Rum. He and his business partner are getting into some French spirits. So they've got a Calvados, they've got an Armagnac. So interested to see what your thoughts are.
It's fun because that's one of the projects I've been working on for a client, developing a new label, new brand for them. And we're doing some bourbon that has been finished, put into different French casks, Calvados being one of those. And so I've got to work with and sample and blend and create with that. And that has been a lot of fun for me. But from a personal note, I'm a big fan of Calvados, so as well as Armagnac and Cognac. So
this is 25 years, by the way. That
I don't know if I've had one quite this old before.
According to Turner, it was in the barn of a pig farmer.
Wow. It's amazing it didn't pick up any of those barnyard notes.
Fortunately, no.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
That is beautiful on the nose. There's a tiny bit of acetone that comes off in that. But man, that smells amazing.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I noticed about the Calvados cask we're using for this project, and I'm not getting any of that in here, is there's a big diacetyl note, which gives you that real kind of, usually gives you real buttery overtones, or it can be like apple or banana note, but the acetone, typically a real big buttery note. And in small amounts, it's okay, but sometimes it can be dominating. And in those casks, it was dominant. And what has been cool is to watch. So when we were first working with the blends, we had to cut down on the Calvados portion of it to tamper down those diacetyl notes. And then, but over the last year, as we've continued to age that out and pull samples, that has started to break down, and it's not as dominant in the Calvados. So we're able to up that percentage in the blends. Really cool. And I'm not getting any of that at all
Yeah.
on this, at least not on the nose. But God, talk about complexity. There's a lot going on in here.
Yeah. And I think this bottle was $125, something like that.
See, that to me, I think some of the best bargains in the spirit world today are Armagnac, vintage Armagnacs and Calvados and Cognac. More Armagnac and Calvados, but
I would agree.
the money, what you get is incredible.
I would agree. And
that's good.
Hopefully people don't ruin that too, you know.
I think, quite honestly, enough of your bros are caught up in the label of Blanton's and Weller and Pappy and Elijah Craig, Barrel Proof, and all that stuff that this is just not even going to be on their radar.
Yeah.
And I'm not sad at all for that. Man, this is, I could sit back with this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just sit back and put me in a dark room with a leather chair and a good vinyl and just crank the music up and just get lost.
To get back to the comment that was made when we first started talking tonight, this is one of those things that as you sip it, it changes and you'll get something dominant on one sip or one nose of it, and then a few minutes later you can get something else, and you can just kind of play with that all night.
Oh man, I got a little tiny hit of diacetyl in that, which was actually kind of nice. That buttery note really played with some of the dark fruit going on.
Yeah.
Almost plum.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is this incredible hit on the back of my throat of some spice and wood. There's almost a tiny note of, it's weird, but it's like peppermint and sandalwood.
Yes.
Interesting combination, and it's just sitting back there on the back of my throat. It's not going away. And it's like every time I exhale, that retronasal, all of that comes through, and it's just holy cow, man.
Yeah. I get
that's what I'm looking for.
I get the sandalwood thing for sure, and it's almost like I get that a lot in Japanese whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that's kind of where the similarities begin and end with this, but it's definitely there.
There's a little hit of rose water in there. This has just got complexity in spades, man. This is, for me as a spirits enthusiast, this is the kind of stuff I live for right here. Just holy cow. Thank you, sir. That is amazing.
You were very welcome. Thank Turner Wathen. Yeah, good stuff. Really good stuff. Let's talk about what else you're listening to music wise.
Again, it's hard for me to get into a lot of new artists unless something triggers or motivates me there. I'm not just pulling like every new release of something coming out. Like even one of my favorite all-time artists, Jason Isbell. I think he is maybe the great songwriter of our generation, period. When his new album Weather Vanes came out, it was probably months down the road before I finally got into it. It was just finally on a, like, okay, I finally need to check this out. And because emotionally I was just in another place, and other music is what was kind of ministering to my needs. So and the first listen through on that, it did not impress me. And I was just kind of like, dang, man, because usually some of his songs they hit like a bomb right off the bat. And again, I'm a lyrics guy, and it was the lyrics. And then I went through a second and a third listen. By about the third or fourth listen, then the kind of the beauty of that album began to hit me. and song after song. I so begin to get it. So that was one I kind of got into. But right now, I've taken a deep dive into two particular artists. There's kind of a third that has an album that's going to be a very interesting take, probably especially for you as well.
Mm,
The first one is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. It's kind of
yep.
like music I've listened to, I'm familiar with, but I've never like bought an album or really got deep into what he was doing. But I would hear a song on the radio or hear a song somewhere and enjoyed it. That's cool. But I'm getting deep into his stuff, and which is weird because coincidentally he's got a new album coming out called Wild God, and there's two tracks that have been released off of that so far, Wild God and Frogs, and I've enjoyed the hell out of both of those. But at the same time, going further into a lot of his stuff, it's weird because he's Australian.
Yep.
And somebody who's never listened to him before, Australian, very deep voice. His style of music, it puts me in the mindset that I'm in like mid 1970s Vegas at 2 o'clock in the morning at some lounge and catching this just quirky lounge act. You also have to understand the dude has had a long battle with heroin, and you can feel that in his style of music. It's got that kind of opiate, like this is, if you're high on opiates, this is what you sit down and listen to. But it's also, it's just interesting. It's very different from stuff that I'm normally into, but lyrically he's challenging because he wrestles with a lot of scripture, a lot of biblical imagery.
Mm,
And that's a lot of his music to me incorporates elements of gospel. And even there's a couple of songs like one, Oh Children, that I feel like could be a ripoff of a modern worship song in a lot of churches. It's got that feel, it's got that orchestration to it, the flow, ebb and flow of it, and even the lyrics of it. It sends you down that route a little bit. But I've enjoyed the heck out of Nick Cave here lately. Hozier is another one.
yep.
He's Take Me to Church. He's had a lot of big hits, very popular. I hear a song, I think that's great, and then all of a sudden, something like something, a switch just flipped, and it's like, I really want to dig into what this guy's doing. So I started listening to his first album, and then his next, and songs like Work Song and Of Eden have all just kind of hit big for me. Just I love his voice. I love stylistically what he's doing with his music. Again, the lyrics I find deep and challenging, and just really enjoying the heck. And for me, his songs have been actually creatively very motivational. I've been working on for just I keep a notebook. I get inspired about a spirit or a mash bill or something I want to create or do with a
Mm,
spirit. He's one that's really started to kind of stir some creativity in me on that realm.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
there's those two guys have been the main two that I've really been digging into lately. And then a third, kind of a flashback from my past, being very much involved in church and ministry, um, leading worship at churches and stuff like that. So somebody who was very, I would say they're kind of influential very early on in that period was an artist named Jennifer Knapp.
Yeah.
She had a lot of hits, big Christian music hits back in the probably late 90s, early 2000, somewhere around that
Yeah.
time period. Had a couple of good albums. Uh, did some other stuff, partnered with some other artists like Caveman's Call, and did some really cool projects and stuff. But she came out as a lesbian, was therefore booted off the radio and pretty much
Sure.
blackballed from the church. And when that happened, she put down her guitar and didn't pick it up for 8 years. Just completely walked away from the music scene. Well, one of her albums, Kansas, which I think might have been her first big album, just hit its 25-year anniversary,
Mm,
and she's kind of worked through that. So anyway, she picked up and re-recorded the whole album fresh and just released it.
interesting.
And I caught wind of it on Instagram. There's a couple of artists, Derek Webb and a few others from that period that I still follow that have taken I would say a similar spiritual path to my own. And through him, I saw her on there talking about working on her new album, and I thought that's interesting. So when it came out, I downloaded it, started listening to it, still listening to it. Just her voice is amazing. I think it's gotten better from the original, as well as her workmanship on the guitar is still really, really good. And it was just it was almost kind of fun just to go back and relive some of that music from that time period. I've gone back and listened to some early Caedmon's Call stuff. That was a band very influential to me at that time period, as well as Derek Webb and I think Caedmon's Call is actually in the process, or they had been re-recording their first album, which is out of production. I think like a lot of early musicians, they didn't own the rights, didn't have the masters, etc.
Right.
Whoever owned it, they put it out of production, so it's not even available for anybody to buy or listen to anymore. So they've basically kind of rewrote the songs and remastered and re-recording and getting ready to release an album of their first release. So just it's kind of fun going back and seeing some, even though that's not where I'm at, so to speak, from a spiritual standpoint, but it's still kind of neat to relive some of that and hear it now from where I'm at this point in life.
Sure.
And so kind of cool. So if you're into that kind of music, or if you just like good music, period, I think she's a cool artist to check out. But Jennifer Knapp and her out in Kansas. So
super talented, super talented.
Very,
I mean, she was somebody that, back in the day, I listened to her and knew that she had kind of got away from music and, changing lifestyle or sexual preference, whatever you want to call it. But did not know that she had come back, and I'll have to go back. I'll have to listen to the new version of Kansas.
I think you'll enjoy it. There's some songs I definitely remember that I've enjoyed, and then there's some others that I had long forgotten from not listening to that album in 25 years, and got back to hear and just that's really cool. But again, I think her voice is what stands out to me on the new recording. Just hear the maturity in her voice and where it's at now, and how that speaks. I think it's very cool.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's great. And Caedmon's Call, I haven't listened to Caedmon's Call in a long time.
Right. Those guys have gotten pretty old. I mean, that was a concert I remember going to see, was Caedmon's Call, and they opened for Jars of Clay.
Oh wow, there you go.
You want to talk about, between both bands, some absolutely stellar acoustic musicianship. Holy cow!
Yeah,
both people in those bands could absolutely play with anybody.
That is very cool. I'm just looking Caedmon's Call up here. Let's see, 1993 to 2010.
Yeah,
and then let's start it back up in 2022.
Right.
I love it. No, that's great.
It's cool. I mean, that's what some of their albums were like. 40 Acres and I think Gather at the Well might be one, or something like that. Some of those albums were, very impactful for me at that time period, at that time point in life. So I thought some great music.
Hang on. Have you ever heard of the band Chagall Guevara?
I've heard you talk about them.
Yeah,
but that would be it.
It would. I think that you would find it interesting.
Is that Steve Tyler?
Steve Taylor.
Steve Taylor. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I listened way back in the day.
Yep.
Early on. So I grew up. For those who don't know, I grew up in son of a Southern Baptist pastor. So for me, that devil music was not allowed in the house for quite a long time. So I grew up on the likes of Petra and Milo Lefevre and Steven Taylor and all those guys.
Yeah.
A lot of the music coming out of the Jesus movement of the 70s, and just different early, what we called Christian rock back then. Carmen, all that stuff. Armo and Key, a lot of those bands. That was what I cut my teeth on.
Yeah. And there was
I discovered new wave.
There was some good music in that, but there's also some very bad music in that. No spiritual judgment at all, but just from a music perspective.
Right.
But the thing that I liked about Chagall Guevara is it was almost like uh, being on the inside and being able to make criticism and critiques about what was going on. So they weren't anti-Christian or anti-church,
Right.
but they did not hesitate to point out the flaws and the issues
Right.
with organized religion. And they did it in a way that musically I thought was just incredible.
Right.
So, and they came out with a new album, I don't know, a couple years ago, and so it's one of the little quirky bands that I've always kind of held on to and go back to from time to time for whatever reason.
I have to check them out because Stephen Taylor's album, I think it was On the Fritz,
On the Fritz,
was
yes.
kind of did the exact same thing, pointed out to a lot of the hypocrisy within organized religion and within the church. And I had a cassette tape of that, and probably out of all the Christian albums I had, that one I maybe wore out the most in my
Yeah.
younger years. So
Yeah. No, he was great. He had a song, "This Disco Used to Be a Cute Cathedral."
yes,
Yeah. So
right,
yeah, but again, not not denying their faith or anything of that nature, but making you think when you're on a steady diet of Amy Grant and Petra and Michael W.
Michael W.
Smith.
Smith,
Not there's anything wrong with those things, because
right,
I was on that diet too. But you need somebody that's going to hold up the mirror to you and say,
right,
okay, yeah, we're not saying anything's wrong with any of these things, but how are you doing it? How are you walking this out? And I think
right.
that's the thing that the church still needs to figure out today, is how do you walk these things out? And it's a challenge.
I will say this: it gets talked about some, but having come from and being involved in the church for a very long time, a lot of people just kind of look the other way. The reality is, Christian music is an industry just like any other industry. It's about profit.
Absolutely.
It's out
Right.
of Nashville. Why are, out of all God's children, the only people that can sing are the most attractive and the best looking that are on the albums and performing, et cetera, et cetera? And why do the songs all sound the same? And
Well,
then the second Mumford and Sons comes out, then every Christian band and church group is trying to sound like Mumford and Sons. Where's the you are from a biblical standpoint, you are the children of the creator. You should be by nature the most creative people on the planet from your religious viewpoint. Where's that creativity? Why are you just having to copy the sound of everybody else?
right.
And it boils down to, it's executives in Nashville who are saying, this is the sound, this is what sells, this is what you'll do. And these are the songs you're going to make. And this is what we're going to feed the public. And everybody just eats it up. I mean, Christian music coming out of the 90s was, I think, the number one most profitable music genre. And especially in the early 2000s, of any of the music genres.
Yeah.
And
And
that
I
should,
think,
tell you something. And people were making bank and still
yeah.
are off of that. And
And
that's why.
I think in the 80s and 90s, you had some creativity in that, because it was kind of the wild, wild west in terms of music,
Right.
because the music executives and the music companies, record companies, they didn't really know what to do with it. So I think people were able to make some really cool stuff.
It's out. That's the
But
thing. It's out there, but what gets channeled to a lot of Christian radio, et cetera, and fed to
oh
most churches
no,
is
I mean Christian radio. You listen to it anymore, and it's
right.
the you're going to hear the same song. If you listen to it for 4 hours, you're going to hear the same songs 5 times.
Redone by 4 different people. Yeah.
and,
And played
and
7 times. It's
and there's a place for that, but I prefer, let's challenge how I'm thinking and what I'm thinking about, and let's be creative. And I just don't think there's that creativity there, like you said, that should be.
It's there are, I will say from my experience, there are churches and there are places that are doing it. They're doing their own music. They're writing their own music for their worship services.
Right.
And it's stuff that's not hitting radio. It's not being, you have to go find it. It's kind of like back in the day of digging through the record store and finding an album of somebody you didn't know. This looks cool. Let's go check this out. And it's not getting radio play. It's not getting anything else.
Right.
You're just discovering stuff. And that's
right.
But speaking of radio stations, this is interesting for me because I got out of radio a long time ago. Like, screw radio, man. I got
Right.
Apple Music and there's Spotify and there's all this stuff. But I've had some stretches of where like car was down and I'm having to drive some other vehicle, and I don't have, it's older. I can't hook up my phone and listen to something. So I'm just listening to the radio for a few days.
Yeah.
There are two really interesting stations here in Kentucky that I have actually made me fall in love with radio again. One is right here in Lexington. It's called 96.1 The Hound, and they're independent. And so you can listen to everybody from Jason Isbell to Johnny Cash to Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats, and then they play a bunch of local independent artists. So you got everything from Tyler Childers. So you're going from bluegrass, deep bluegrass and country to alternative rock, and they play a lot of local people and give them airplay. And so it's just a bunch of independent and interesting artists. I mean, I've heard everybody from Colter Wall, people you will never hear on a standard country music radio station. Right. And it's just, or even rock station. It's phenomenal. And I've been blown away with what I've gotten to listen to there. And then in Lexington, there's another station, I think, called The Mixtape. I think it's 91.9 on the dial. I mean, not in Lexington, but in Louisville. And again, I'm hearing everything from Ike and Tina Turner to the Police to modern alternative bands and just every style of music in between. It's deep cuts from albums. It's stuff you will not hear on normal radio. Again, it's an independent station and they're just playing really cool stuff. And it's everything from current modern alternative to, classic R&B, just, and all the gamut in between. Phenomenal. It kind of like, holy cow, radio can be cool again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that because I think if you get into Apple Music, you get into Spotify, it's like anything else. It's easy to become a slave to the algorithm. So if you're listening, I mean, I'll listen to a lot of blues rock. I enjoy that. I love the sound of it. People that say rock is dead, you're wrong. But that's what continues to show up. If I let's look at the release radars and stuff like that. It's all stuff that, okay, the algorithm knows me. So I've got to make the effort to step into other genres and do a deep dive. And, I can be and will be critical of Christian radio because I think that there is just a ton of sameness and copycat stuff going on. But I also know that if I took the time to dig into it, I would find some people that are doing exactly what you're talking about, that are being creative, that are pushing some envelopes, that are both in terms of their music and their lyrics, and it's out there. I just haven't taken the time to go find it. And that's what I tell people when they say rock is dead. Well, you're not willing to put forth the effort to resurrect it in your own mind and in your own heart.
You have to be intentional and you have to be diligent about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is turning into a Joe Rogan-esque length show, but before this has been a ton
we can't
of fun.
take into the mothership after we're done here. Get some comedy.
Let's go back to this Japanese single malt, the Chip Tate thing, and let's see if that's changed at all in the, I don't know, hour almost since we tried it last time.
Yeah. Okay, so it is softened on the nose as far as the port, and a little bit more of the malt characters coming through on there. On the palate, it's still very much poured up front, but now I'm getting more of the malts coming through on the back end. Whereas before, I was the port just dominated front to back for me, but now I'm getting some more of the that grainy sweetness of the malt coming through on the back end. A little bit of vanilla character to it.
When I first opened this bottle, it was a lot more complex than it is right now. The first couple of pours I had out of this bottle, the night I opened it, I thought this is incredibly complex. But as it's sat in the bottle, and again, I've had this 2 months, 3 months at the most.
Right.
The port influence has increased, it feels, and I think that's interesting as to why that would be the case.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is oxidation,
right? But what, I wouldn't think that oxidation would kill everything else and
allow that to be more dominant. Yeah. It's I mean, it's really interesting. It's one reason why when we're doing blends, or I mean, it's a hard line to walk, because there's production schedules that have to be followed, right? Like bottling has to be fed. We've got to keep them busy, and we try to time things out to where we're dumping barrels, we're doing a blend, and then we're vatting it and we're letting it sit for a period.
Right.
We cut it, and then we're going to let it sit before we get ready to do the filtration. And we're there pulling samples and we're tasting. And part of that is letting those flavors marry together, because we don't want to do something that gets in the bottle and then it turns out to be completely different. Because truth is that the longer things sit, the longer those flavors work together, the more it's going to develop, and the chemical things that are happening in there are going to happen. And it's not just a boom, boom, boom. And so you have to walk that line between wanting to let things sit long enough so that happens, to also maintaining your production schedules. But that's very possibly what has happened here. I don't know the timeline of when this would have been dumped, et cetera, but the longer it sits in that bottle, the more those things are happening. And now the notes that it's pulled from the barrel are chemically becoming the more dominant, the dominant thing there. So,
but I would agree with you. As it sat in the glass, the port influence has faded a little bit. But I'm still surprised. It's still very porty.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad. It's not bad at all. It's
not at all.
It's just porty.
It's I mean, again, it's like if I'm doing sensory in the lab, and this is what I try to teach our guys, is you're tasting this. This is a product for a customer, for a client. Is it what do you mean by bad? Is it bad in that you just don't like this? It's not your palate preference, or is it bad that there's a flaw, that there's actually there's there geosmin, is there TCA contamination, is there something wrong with it? There's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It is clean, good spirit. I love port. I would sit down and drink this all day long. But being the fact that it's Japanese malts, is that right? A blend of different Japanese malts,
Japanese single malt whiskey.
Yeah, then that's what I would expect to taste, and that's what I want to taste, is the malt, and not just the barrel that it was finished in. And really, 80% of the flavor that I'm getting right here is port barrel.
Yeah, and I don't know what because it's also finished in bourbon cask as well. I don't know if that was a sequential thing, or if we've got some bourbon cask, we've got some port cask, and we blended it.
Blend together, right? Create a ratio. That to me makes more sense, but it is very possible they could have put it into port cask dumped that, and then turned around and put it into bourbon
Yeah.
casks for another.
Yeah.
But I think from just my industry knowledge, etc., from a financial standpoint, they're typically going to go for what is the more economical thing to do,
Right.
and that's going to be put some in port, put some in bourbon, and then let's blend it.
Yeah.
But
I'll get Chip on the show. We'll find out, because I think this is an interesting project altogether. And so get him on the show and we'll talk about
sure.
it. But Benji, man, we're right at 2 hours.
We could do this all night.
and absolutely could. But this has been a lot of fun to catch up, and I'm really excited for you and everything you've got going on over at Kentucky Artisan. But before we get away, tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Catch me on Instagram, Padawan_distiller. I try to shine a light on what the job is really like in distilling, and it is not just sitting in warehouses, sipping on sampling barrels and holding this up to the perfect light coming through the rick house, etc. That is not what this job is about at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So check that out.
Or come see me at Kentucky Artisan. Come out and do a tour. Drop in, check us out. We'd love to have you.
For us, you can watch the show on YouTube. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. We have a Facebook page where we release all of our shows, including this one. And we have a Facebook group where we'll post what we're drinking and what we're listening to while we're drinking it. Maybe I'll be drinking some Whiskey Row and listening to some Tool, or some Wayward Cask and Nick Cave. You've got me intrigued about Nick Cave, because it's been a long. I mean, Nick Cave was back. He started 40 years ago.
He's been around for a long time, but his voice, even his new album, voice sounds amazing. The musical style is cool. Again, it's one of those styles of music that I want to go sit in a dark room in a leather chair, vinyl with an incredible sound system, just crank it up and just sit back and just let the music kind of envelop you. And it's a very, I don't know, it's been a whole different experience for me, and I've really enjoyed the rabbit hole of exploring Nick. I mean, I think everybody's familiar with the whole Red Right Hand song. That was X-Files soundtrack for the movie way back in the day, and then the whole what's the Netflix show, the Irish mafia dudes that it became very popular with. I think they used that for the opening sequence on their on the show on Netflix, and people kind of are familiar with that. But all of his other stuff, man, it's some really cool music.
Yeah. No, it's some good stuff. To some of it to tap back into stuff, some of it to tap into from the beginning. So, but thanks a lot, man. This has been great. And let's not make it so long before we do this again.
For real, man.
Because the thing that I've always appreciated about our friendship is there's never a shortage of things to talk about.
No, again, we could sit on the patio, or we could sit here or whatever, and we could probably go all night.
Let's sit on the patio sometime soon. How about that?
The unfortunate side of this industry, the demands on your time and the demands on your energy are real. And so when you're done with the day, you are done with the day.
Oh man. Well, take care of yourself. And this show will be out pretty soon. And I'll be sure to let you know and tag you on everything when it does. But until next time, on behalf of Benjamin Eaves and myself, cheers, love, and free bird. Night.